The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild is considered to be a masterpiece by many, a game that revolutionized and changed the way we look at and play Legend of Zelda games. But with that, it doesn't mean it can't be better. And so in this video, I'm going to talk about the 5 things Breath of the Wild needs to add to make Breath of the Wild 2 even better than Breath of the Wild. The first of these additions we'll be talking about is the addition of individual dungeons, unique dungeons that aren't just copies of each other. In Breath of the Wild, there were the 4 divine beasts, but they were all really just remakes of each other with a slight change in how to solve the puzzle. And they were definitely fun and enjoyable, but once you figured out the first one, they kind of became pretty easy. So in Breath of the Wild 2, they need to make dungeons like how they used to, traditional dungeons, like the Stone Tower Temple, the Ancient Cistern, Snow Peak Ruins, great temples like that. You can still have them be placed in the world at different locations, and there's no set course you have to go to. You can go to any of them at any point, but just bring back the traditional dungeons. That's what a lot of people are looking for and need. And when it comes to the shrines, keep shrine-like activities or mini-dungeons in the game. It may not be exactly the Sheikah Shrine again, but something similar, because those were great for fast travel and also for making you think. Even though they were just little puzzles in comparison to the big dungeon, adding these would definitely help out the game in more ways than it can hurt, so bring back these as well. But for the main dungeons, add maybe 5 of them instead of 4, and make it so they're traditional. They each have their own unique flair. There's something different about it. It's not just, oh, you've learned that you have to move the map in some way to make a puzzle activate. Make it so there's actually difference between them. And when it comes to speaking of differences between things and uniqueness, our second point, which kind of goes along with the individual dungeons, is to have unique bosses. As I explained, in Breath of the Wild, all the bosses were like just copies of each other, with the Blight Ganons and then the final boss of Ganon. Besides his Dark Beast form, as that was different. But add back unique bosses like Galactos, Stalord, Darklink. Have each temple have its own individual boss, someone that stands out from the others. And while they're at it, Breath of the Wild was an incredibly beautiful game. And so make some of these bosses these big hulking monsters. Bring back the cinematic shots from Twilight Princess. Make this game use the beauty it has with these bosses and making them massive, cinematography. Just make it a beautiful game. Make these bosses evil and something that people will remember for a while, like the bosses I named before. Just bring back something that shows that there's a little creativity in the game with unique bosses. And with individual dungeons and unique bosses, let's bring back special weapons such as a boomerang, a double claw shot, a roc's cape, things like that that you get in these dungeons and are needed to defeat the boss in that dungeon. Now, they could have it so it's either like the traditional Zelda where these are actual physical items, or they could have it where if you still have the Sheikah Slate in this game, it's just a new application that's added on to the ones you already have. And with this, they can make this work where the final boss, which we assume will be Ganondorf on top of Hyrule Castle, high above, you make it so you cannot fight him right away like you could in Breath of the Wild, where in your underwear you just grab a tree branch and you can go fight Ganondorf. No, they make it so you have to defeat these individual dungeons first, and then you can go fight him. Yes, it takes away from some of the freedom, but I feel it's no fun to just go fight Ganondorf right off the bat with nothing anyway. I mean, I guess for like fun and maybe for like a video idea, but for the story purpose, I feel it would be better if you had these dungeons. You don't have to do them in specific order. The items won't be necessary for another dungeon. They'll just be necessary for when you get to Ganondorf at the end, so you have all the items. And these items are always fun. They make it so you can do more things, and I'm sure they have plenty of ideas and can come up with some for great ways to use new items or old items that they bring back in Breath of the Wild, as we assume it'll be the same Breath of the Wild world that we played in before. Speaking of the beautiful world of Breath of the Wild, you're outdoors most of the time, traveling and traversing the land, and you run into bokoblins, moblins, and choo-choos for most of the time. So another thing I think they need to add for Breath of the Wild 2 to be even better than Breath of the Wild is have more types of enemies in the game, such as Poe, Gibdo, Darknut, just to name a few of the hundreds of enemies there are in the Legend of Zelda series. They could have more overworld bosses such as Darknuts, being similar to the Hinox or the Lionels and being a stronger enemy on the overworld, and then have other enemies like Poe at nighttime or Lake-likes or other things such as those throughout the world instead of always being Bokoblins, Moblins, and Choo-Choos. Now you can keep Bokoblins, Moblins, Choo-Choos, Lionels, Hinoxes, all the other enemies from Breath of the Wild in the game still, but add a few more, and you can make them region specific, so around a temple, say in the southwest, the temple there and the enemies inside it and around it are a specific type and they're not elsewhere in the map. The Bokoblins things could still be universal to the whole map, but instead of just changing the enemy's type, such as Fire Keese, Ice Keese, depending on where you are, make it so it's a different type of enemy. It could still be their elemental, and in the desert there's still fire, and in the mountains there's still ice, but they're just not different versions of the same enemy. So more uniqueness and types of enemies in the world. And when it comes to talking about the beautiful world that is the Breath of the Wild landscape, we get to our final point, which is touching on the weather, and more specifically, the rainfall. In Breath of the Wild, it rains constantly. There's always some time where you're going, and then it's just going to start raining and rain for a little while. Now, rain makes it nearly impossible to climb certain things, especially if you don't have full stamina. And then, even if with full stamina, there are some cliffs that are just too big to climb when it's raining, since you slip and fall down. They need to make it so the rain in the game is either less common and doesn't happen as often, or it doesn't happen for as long. Because there are times where you need to get over this cliff, and going around to avoid the rain and trying to find another way up just takes so long, so it's easier just to sit there and just wait until it stops raining than it would be to walk all the way around. So they need to change this, as it's a big issue and one that just is an unnecessary hindrance to the player. It's an unnecessary bother, an inconvenience. I think there should still be rain in the game, and there should definitely still be thunderstorms, as being able to use metal objects to use the lightning and cool different ways to help you out with things is definitely awesome, and the rain definitely makes it more realistic. But just make it so the rain isn't as often or for as long, so people can still get moving and do things they need to do even when it rains. And with that, those are the 5 things I think they need to add to Breath of the Wild to make Breath of the Wild 2 even better than Breath of the Wild was. But we will have a bonus 6th piece that I think they need to add, and this goes along with my theory video I put out at the end of Zelda as we know it. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. I'll give you a couple seconds here to pause this. Go watch that real quick. It's a short little video about Ganondorf and the future of Zelda from Breath of the Wild 2 onward. Alright, if you're still here, that means you've either seen it, which thank you, that means a lot, or you're just going to wait for me to give you a quick little rundown of it, or check it out after. Basically, I theorize that this is Ganondorf's final game. He's been around for so long, battling different links throughout time, that it's finally time he is retired and finally defeated. Now, there will have to be a new villain to take his place, and it very well could be that the next male Gerudo born is just Ganondorf's reincarnate, and that would be fine too, but this specific Ganondorf, I believe this is his last game. And with that, Breath of the Wild 2 needs a send-off worthy of Ganondorf, a big, grand finale, which is why I say you don't let players go straight up to Ganondorf and fight him right off the bat, as he is who we assume will be the final boss on top of Hyrule Castle, floating above as we see in the trailer for Breath of the Wild 2. Make it a grand battle. You have to do all the other dungeons first, and then you can go fight him. Start it off with maybe the mummified Ganondorf-looking guy. Well, it's Ganondorf, but the mummy-looking version that you see in the trailer. Maybe a game of tennis. He's just using magic because he's really weak. And tennis, Ocarina of Time when you see Ganondorf, Twilight Princess, it's a staple of Ganondorf. He's a big tennis player. Then maybe make it so he recovers his strength. You have a sword fight on top of the castle, and right before you're about to defeat him, the castle plummets back down to earth, causing mayhem. Then maybe make him transform into a beast form, maybe not the ones from Twilight Princess or Breath of the Wild, but similar to the Ocarina of Time beast form he takes with 2 swords, have another battle, and then maybe jump to a 4th final scene, maybe a chase like in Breath of the Wild, or in Twilight Princess, not Breath of the Wild, a chase where you shoot him on horseback, and then a final sword fight. Something epic, an epic battle people will remember for the end of this Ganondorf. Something worthy of Ganondorf's greatness that makes him go out and you're like, wow, that was awesome. That's the final thing I think should be added to the game. Let me know what you guys think, what other ideas you have that should be added to Breath of the Wild and put into Breath of the Wild 2. And make sure they still fit, you know, the open world can go do with anything, because that was what really made Breath of the Wild so awesome, and that's what they're going to continue with. But let me know what you guys think about these things, what else you want to see in the game down below. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, of course. Subscribe if you haven't already. Really appreciate it. And just thank you for all the support and everything you guys have done. See you later.